The summer before last, I took a seasonal job as a fire lookout in western Montana. I just graduated from college, and after spending 4 straight years around people, deadlines, and noisy roommates, I wanted complete isolation. The Forest Service was hiring seasonal lookouts. The pay wasn't great. The location definitely wasn't for everyone. But they provided a small cabin on top of a steel lookout tower with a 360-degree view of the forest. That was enough for me. The nearest town was about 40 miles away. No cell service.
No Wi-Fi.
Just a 2-way radio, a pair of binoculars, weather logs, and endless trees stretching toward the horizon. On my first day, a veteran ranger named Dale drove me to the tower. He spent nearly an hour showing me how everything worked. Every morning, I'd record the temperature, humidity, and wind speed. Every afternoon, I'd scan the mountains for smoke. If I spotted anything unusual, I'd report it over the radio. Simple. Before leaving, Dale placed the cabin keys on the table. Then he stopped at the doorway like he'd almost forgotten something. If you hear someone climbing the tower after dark, he looked out toward the staircase before finishing. Stay inside until sunrise. I laughed. Is this the part where you tell me there's a ghost in the woods? He didn't smile. Instead, he said, people hear strange things out here when they've been alone too long. Then he climbed into his truck and disappeared down the mountain. I convinced myself he was just trying to make the job sound more interesting. The first week was exactly what I expected. Quiet mornings, long afternoons, beautiful sunsets. At night, the forest became almost completely silent. No traffic, no city lights, just the wind moving through thousands of pine trees. After a while, I actually started enjoying the silence. Then, on my 8th night, I woke up for no obvious reason. The cabin was completely dark. I reached for the small clock beside my bed.
1:43 a.m.
That's when I heard it. Clang. A loud metallic sound echoed from below. It sounded exactly like a heavy boot landing on one of the steel steps. I stayed still. A few seconds passed. Then another. Clang. Someone was climbing the staircase. Slowly, 1 step at a time. There shouldn't have been anyone out there. The access road was locked every evening. The nearest campground was miles away. Even if someone had somehow made it up the mountain, why would they be climbing a fire lookout tower in the middle of the night? The footsteps continued. I kept the flashlight aimed at the staircase for almost a full minute. Nothing. No movement.
No shadow.
No one standing between the railings. The metal steps were completely empty. Then, the footsteps stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed somehow felt worse. I stayed awake until sunrise, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the tower had expanded and contracted as the temperature changed. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe I was still half asleep. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself that was the answer. The rest of the day was normal. I scanned the tree line, logged the weather, spoke to another lookout over the radio for a few minutes. I almost mentioned the footsteps, but I decided not to. I didn't want to sound paranoid after only a week on the job. That evening, dark clouds rolled over the mountains. By 9 o'clock, rain was falling hard enough to shake the roof. The storm lasted nearly 2 hours. When it finally cleared, the air was unusually cold. Around midnight, I stepped onto the observation deck for a few minutes. Everything below looked soaked. That's when I noticed something strange. The staircase was wet from the rain, except for one narrow path. A line of perfectly dry footprints led halfway up the stairs. Not muddy, not visible because of dirt. Visible because every step around them was soaked, while those exact spots were completely dry. I stared at them, trying to make sense of it. They ended halfway up the tower. There were no prints above them, none below them, just 8 dry footprints, as if someone had appeared in the middle of the staircase, and then vanished. A chill ran through me. I backed inside and locked the cabin door. For the first time since arriving, I wasn't looking forward to another night alone. At 1:43 a.m., I was already awake. The clock hadn't even changed to 1:44 when I heard it again. Clang. 1 step. then another, closer than the night before. I reached for the radio. Before I could press the transmit button, a burst of static filled the cabin. Then a calm voice broke through. It wasn't dispatch. It wasn't another lookout. It was an older man's voice, quiet, almost whispering. He said only one sentence. "Don't count the footsteps." The radio went silent. Outside, another metallic step echoed through the darkness. Clang. This time, it sounded like whoever was climbing had reached the landing just below my cabin. I stared at the cabin door without moving. The landing outside was only a few feet away. If someone was really standing there, all they had to do was knock. But nothing happened.
No voices. No footsteps.
Just silence. I waited. 1 minute, then 5. Eventually, I worked up the courage to peek through the small window beside the door. The landing was empty. The flashlight hanging by the door reflected off the wet steel railing. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I slowly unlocked the door and stepped outside. The night air was freezing. I swept my flashlight across the landing, then down the staircase. Nothing. No person. No animal. No fresh footprints. It was as if the sound had come from nowhere. The next morning, I radioed Dale and casually asked if anyone had been sent up the mountain overnight. He answered almost immediately.
No.
Why? I hesitated. I thought I heard someone on the stairs. There was a long pause. Long enough that I checked the radio to make sure it was still working. Finally, he said, "You're not the first lookout to say that." Before I could ask what he meant, the transmission cut into loud static. When it cleared, Dale had already signed off. That afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Not the first lookout. So other people had heard it too. That evening, I decided to set up a small battery-powered trail camera I kept with my gear. I strapped it to the railing, aiming it directly at the staircase. If someone was climbing every night, the camera would catch them. At 1:43 a.m., the first metallic step echoed through the darkness. Clang. I stayed away from the wind. The footsteps stopped. No knock. No voice. Nothing. When the sun finally came up, I rushed outside and grabbed the camera. Back inside, I opened the memory card on my laptop. There were 12 photos. The first 11 showed an empty staircase. The 12th made my stomach drop. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even the stairs. The camera had somehow turned toward the cabin window and taken a perfectly clear picture of me, standing inside, looking out. The problem was, I had never gone near the window that night. I had spent the entire time sitting on the floor, against the opposite wall. I must have looked at that last photo 100 times. The timestamp matched the exact moment the footsteps stopped.
1:51 a.m.
The image wasn't blurry. It wasn't distorted. It showed me standing perfectly still at the window, one hand resting against the glass. The only problem, I remembered exactly where I'd been, sitting on the floor, across the room. I even checked the cabin. The chair beneath the window hadn't moved. Nothing in the room suggested I'd walked over there without realizing it. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on my job. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself glancing at the staircase through the binoculars. Stayed empty. That afternoon, another ranger came over the radio to ask if I was doing okay. Apparently Dale had mentioned that I sounded off. I almost told him everything. The footsteps, the photo, the strange voice on the radio. Instead, I just said I hadn't been sleeping well. He told me to hang in there. There were only 3 weeks left in the season. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide. If someone or something was coming to the tower every night, I wanted proof. Before sunset, I sprinkled a thin layer of ash across every step on the upper staircase. If anyone climbed up, they'd leave footprints. Simple. At 1:43 a.m., it started again. Clang. Another step. Then another. The sound climbed steadily toward the cabin. I forced myself not to look outside. The footsteps reached the landing. Silence. Then, a slow scrape, like someone dragging their fingers across the metal railing. The sound moved from one end of the platform to the other, stopping directly outside my door. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Then came 3 slow knocks. Knock! 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 A calm voice spoke through the door. Dale, if this is some kind of joke, stop. Only static answered. Then, through the static, the real Dale's voice came through. Frantic this time. Don't open the door. His voice cracked. I've been trying to reach you for the last 10 minutes. Whatever you hear. The transmission cut out. Outside, the voice spoke again. Exactly the same. Exactly like Dale. Only this time it said, he'll tell you not to open it. Then the doorknob, slowly, began to turn. The doorknob turned as far as it could. Then it stopped. Whoever or whatever was outside didn't knock again. It just stood there, waiting. I backed away from the door without making a sound. My hand was still gripping the radio when it came back to life. Dylan. It was Dale. This time his voice was clear. If it's turning the handle, don't let it know you're still inside. I didn't answer. Couldn't. For nearly 20 minutes, the cabin was completely silent. Then, without warning, clang. A single metallic step echoed below. Then another. The footsteps were moving away, slowly descending the staircase. One step at a time. I waited another hour before looking outside. The landing was empty. The staircase disappeared into the darkness. Nothing was there. At sunrise, I opened the door. The ash I'd spread across the landing hadn't been disturbed. Not a single footprint. Not even mine. I had stepped carefully over it. It was impossible. I had heard someone standing outside my door. I'd heard the handle turn. But whatever had been there had left no trace. I packed my gear that morning and radioed Dale. I told him I was done. When he arrived that afternoon, he didn't ask many questions. He loaded my bags into the truck, and we started driving down the mountain. About halfway down, I finally asked him the question that had been bothering me. Has this happened before? He kept his eyes on the road. After a long silence, he nodded. The lookout before you lasted 11 nights. The one before him made it almost a month. I waited for him to explain. He never did. Just before we reached the ranger station, he quietly said, some towers get abandoned because of storms. He paused. And some, because nobody can explain what keeps climbing them. I never went back. A few weeks later, I received a package from the Forest Service. Inside was the trail camera I'd forgotten to take with me. They'd found it in a storage box. Out of curiosity, I plugged the memory card into my computer one last time. There was one video file I had never seen before. It was recorded at 1:43 a.m. on my final night. The camera faced the staircase. For almost 8 minutes, nothing happened. No footsteps, no movement, just an empty staircase. Then, during the last 5 seconds of the video, a voice spoke from directly behind the camera. Quiet, calm, almost amused. It said, he finally left. The camera shut off immediately afterward. I still have that video. I've copied it onto 3 different hard drives over the years. Every version is exactly the same. An empty staircase, a voice that shouldn't be there, and no sign of who or what climbed those stairs every night.